Hello and welcome to another episode of Journey Through Sci-Fi. My name is James.
My name is Matt.
And today's episode is a TV special. So we're going to be looking at Battlestar Galactica from 2003 and Westworld from 2016. And to help us to analyse and chat about these two series, we've enlisted the help of film critic, broadcaster, BBC Radio 6 film critic in particular, former Radio 1 film critic as well, the fantastic Rhianna Dhillon. How you doing, Rhianna?
Oh, yeah, good. Thank you.
Did you like my intro?
That was great. That was really good. Although I'm also a TV critic as well, which
and
is
TV
kind of
critic.
crucial for this today.
Oh, no. I should have really said that bit as well.
Do you know what? I am really quite nervous about this because I kind of guest on quite a lot of podcasts. It's like my third in a week. And this is the one that I am most nervous about because I think it means the most to me. For multiple reasons, because, you know, I know you guys anyway, outside of work.
Yeah.
But also because Battlestar Galactica is like one of my favourite programmes of all time.
It is fantastic.
And I feel like I'm not going to do this justice. I'm going to forget things and I won't say enough about how much I love Cora Thrace. That's what I'm really worried about. So yeah, a bit anxious.
It's all good. We will guide you through it.
Okay.
And just for everybody who's listening, if you haven't watched either of these series, I have no doubt that we will be saying lots of spoilers throughout the episode.
Yeah.
100%. I'm going to get out of my way to say spoilers.
So if you haven't watched these series yet, go back, watch them, and then come back to us. If you're not that bothered, they've been out for quite a while, then enjoy the chat. So Rhianna, before we start chatting about Battlestar and Westworld, there's a few things that we ask people when they come on the show. I say ask people. The only person we've had on so far is Mike.
Yeah, so you're in good company.
Should we say at this point that Mike is my boyfriend?
Yes, that was our in for getting this for getting Rhianna in on the show.
Can't really say no to my boyfriend's best mates, can I? Yeah, I was strong-armed into
We had
this.
a bit of sway there. So as we've asked previously, are you a fan of sci-fi?
I am a huge fan, yeah.
Brilliant. So what is your earliest memory of sci-fi? Like, was there a film that you watched when you were younger, or a TV show? Or when was the first time that you watched something and you were like, oh, this is sci-fi and I quite like it?
Earliest memories, I guess. I mean, of TV actually in general, but also sci-fi is, I'm sure like so many people, Star Trek.
On the BBC Two, 6:30
yeah, the BBC,
slot.
exactly. And was it on Sundays as well during the day? Sometimes I feel like sometimes it was a bit earlier. But yeah, and like with The Simpsons, that sort of, they used to have like those double bills. And also my dad was a huge fan of Star Trek, and so it was kind of always on. I always used to really enjoy it, and I used to get I used to be in love with William Shatner. But you know, when you like, as a child, I was like, oh, I really love this man. He's so masculine.
As a child,
I was like, I love him. He's amazing.
I'm kind of in love with him as an adult.
is this like original William Shatner as well, like the original series?
Yeah.
Yeah,
in
he's
his
gone a
prime.
bit strange now, hasn't he?
Oh, he has, hasn't he? Yeah.
Wasn't he in Miss Congeniality?
He was.
Yeah.
He absolutely was.
Yeah,
Good
showing my
That's a weird
super
pull.
sci-fi knowledge.
But yeah, I think that was quite cool. I think as a child as well, Star Trek's a really good introduction because there are so many colours for a start, you know, just like all of the uniforms look amazing. My ballet teacher was a Star Trek fan, and I remember her putting on ballets where she would make us dress up in Star Trek outfits.
Wow.
Sounds
Little
cool.
badges.
That's amazing.
So it was kind of always there, I suppose, when I was little.
And I think Star Trek has like good morals about it as well. They're all quite sort of moralistic stories.
Well, I agree in the original series, and I think it's interesting that the show we're going to talk about today is one of the shows is Battlestar, which is Ronald D. Moore's project, and he was a big Star Trek guy, and he really took control more in the Deep Space Nine years, where the morals became a lot more clouded and controversial, and war crimes kind of came into it and stuff like that. So the waters got muddied morally, I think, in Deep Space Nine.
There was a lot of Star Trek fans which were really against his sort of stories, weren't there?
Yeah, they're all wrong. Dead wrong.
And he made Battlestar, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He knows what he's doing. Sort of. We'll get to that.
Ooh, interesting.
But don't quiz me too closely on the Star Treks or anything actually. But just I feel like I have like sort of all round knowledge. I know what I like and I know what I don't like. But I find it really difficult to differentiate between all the different series and seasons, and like I can't tell you which films Picard was in or if he was,
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to sort of digest with the whole Star Trek universe.
Yeah.
All right, we'll cancel the quiz at the end of the episode.
The pop quiz that you've just been writing in your head. I bet you have.
I could deploy one. Have you got a favourite sci-fi film or TV show?
Well, Battlestar is my favourite, I think, TV show. I do prefer series, I guess, because they are meatier, and Star Trek Discovery I found really exciting, that it was like a sort of new Star Trek for my generation, that I could kind of watch with the same intensity that previous generations got to do.
Yeah.
And so that was really exciting for me. I like the Star Wars films, but I came to them much, much later as an adult. And so they weren't there for me growing up.
Ah, interesting. Because I had them throughout my childhood, so I think I've got more of a connection to them. What was it like looking at those from an adult perspective, like the first time?
Yeah, it was. I suppose like some of them look so cheesy now and dated, but the mythology around them, because of course you do grow up knowing the kind of the big plot points, and my dad talking about it or whatever, it's just in our culture, so it's not like I didn't know what was going on, but just to kind of see the fabric of it, and you kind of understand why it means so much to the fans. So you can be a bit snooty about it if you want to be, but actually I think it's so incredible that there's this whole world, this whole universe out there that means so much to so many people, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger now. And that's what I don't understand with fans kind of shooting down all of the new ones and being so frustrated for whatever reason. I suppose I really enjoy them for what they are, but they're escapism, they're entertainment. But it means so much to people. They get so angry about it. I don't understand where that anger comes from, really.
Yeah, I think that does happen with a lot of sci-fi properties. People get so invested in them, sometimes they can't take a step back from sort of like the original and the way the originals were.
Yeah, and that's why you can cash in so easily and regularly on going back to those original roots.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Terminator Dark Fate, and I was a sucker for it.
It was great.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
Bringing back.
Should
I mean,
I?
it's not. Yeah. Yes.
Like
it's not the best film in the world, but
watch.
Right.
Yeah.
Arnie and Linda Hamilton back on screen together carries an awful lot of weight.
Yeah.
And it's very satisfying.
But is it mainly for Linda Hamilton?
It's both of them. Are you not an Arnie fan?
Well, everyone has their ups and downs with Arnie, right? Like,
Oh
surely.
no, Arnie's just great. He's just always great. He's always got the best lines. He
The same
is the
line.
man.
Yeah,
The same line.
I don't think he's been in any bad films, has he?
It's interesting you bring up Star Wars, actually. So both the shows we're going to be looking at were originally based on properties from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know much about sort of Battlestar and Westworld from the 70s?
I really don't.
That is fine, and
I know.
that's interesting because I think a
Buckle
lot of
about
people don't.
Yeah.
Like Matt. What about you?
I think I've seen all of the original Battlestar Galactica, because it was also when BBC Two couldn't get episodes of Star Trek to fill in that gap. I'm sure they put on Battlestar in that slot. I'm sure I've
Really?
seen
Maybe I
Definitely
accidentally
did.
watched it then.
and I've since, as an adult, I've watched there's like a pilot episode movie length. It's like the first two or three episodes.
Yeah.
Released as a movie. It's awful.
Is it?
Really bad. Yeah.
So you know that first pilot episode, that was supposed to be competition for Star Wars, because Star Wars had just come out, or it come out recently, and Battlestar was very much supposed to be like the next big space opera. So they put it out in cinemas initially, and then they sort of did the spin-off series after that.
So that's interesting, because I can understand why they would want to do that, to try and get in on that action. But also the way that story is structured, it literally is 3 episodes. Like that the final third of the film takes place on a like completely other planet that they just get to, and then there's roughly 45 minutes where they're on this other random planet. Like there's no way it was scripted as an outright film.
Yeah, but that's what they were going for. They really wanted
Fair
to
enough.
cash in on this sort of Star Wars fame with this, and I think they might have got into a few problems with studios claiming it was too much like Star Wars. I mean, even the poster for it looks like the first Star Wars film. But yeah, so there was Battlestar was very much sort of like a space opera, and then obviously Westworld was based on the film by Michael Crichton.
Oh,
Yeah.
the series, right?
Yeah. So the Westworld series. But yeah, so the Westworld film came out in 1973, and so it's interesting that both these series have taken properties from the 70s and redone them, but better. They're both better in my opinion. I mean, the original Battlestar has them meeting aliens and stuff like that, and they were doing it really quickly as well. So basically they were writing the scripts as they were shooting sometimes. So there's moments in the show where they're sort of improving, trying to get their lines
Really?
down.
That feels really
In the
old
original?
school.
Yeah, in the
Wow.
original.
That's very old-fashioned, isn't it?
Yeah.
They don't. What about the writers' rooms and all that?
That's it. And it was just because they were just trying to pump it out as quickly as they could,
crazy.
so they could get it out there, because it was doing really well. It got lots of like press and stuff when it first came out. I don't know so much about how Westworld was received when it first came out.
I don't think it was a huge hit.
Yeah, but it's become quite a cult.
It's a
film.
cult thing, but have you both seen the original Westworld?
No, I haven't. And it's got Yul Brynner in. That's all I know.
Yeah,
That's what most people own.
it's a very very simple film. A man gets chased through a theme park by a malfunctioning cowboy
AI.
robot.
Okay.
And that's it. It's just like a
Which
long
character
chase
is
scene.
Yul Brynner?
He's the malfunctioning cowboy.
Right. Okay. He's normally the cowboy.
He's
so.
basically the man in black
Oh, I
from
see.
the TV
Yeah,
series.
yeah.
So
Well,
that
he looks very similar.
yeah, the look of that character is
Okay.
very closely modelled on Yul Brynner. What struck me, I watched the film a few years ago. What struck me is that you can tell that it's Michael Crichton's sort of prototype work for Jurassic Park.
Right.
Yeah.
All the malfunctioning theme park stuff
Yeah.
and the background scenes, the control room scenes, all of that's in there. You can see that he follows through that thinking in his work and then creates something better later in his career.
Is it like, does it still have like the fun element that Jurassic
No.
Park does? Right.
I don't,
No,
not
it's
in my
so he
opinion.
added-
brutal,
It's
isn't
very
it?
grim, bleak
Okay.
70s sci-fi
Right.
with a very simple plot and not much
Because that's what I love about sci-fi, is that it can be, you know, like you say, all these moral kind of overtones, but also incredibly fun as well. And I don't just mean like funny or slapstick, but just so engaging, and just it's the ultimate escapism. And you know, I really enjoy sci-fi. I love how it can reinvent things all the time. You know, how Star Trek was so well known for being just like at the top of its game and introducing, you know, like the first, my mum always tells me off for saying this wrong, mixed race kiss, but dual heritage kiss, whatever. She's a social worker, so I have to get this right.
Kirk and Uhura.
Yeah, although it was
Presumably,
supposed
right?
to be Spock and Uhura.
Was it?
Yeah, and apparently, well, I read this like years ago, so this
Yeah.
like nugget is stuck in my brain. But apparently Shatner was just like, no, I'm the hero, it's going to be me. And so in the films, they rectify that by making it Spock and Uhura.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The whole social commentary element of science fiction is sort of something that me and Matt talk about time and time again.
Yeah.
Pretty much every week, really.
Yeah, we've started making a podcast about it.
I didn't know. Tag me on.
But yeah, it's interesting because the 70s ones that we're describing don't seem to have as much of the social commentary as you get in these series which have been made since. Battlestar has lots of different social commentary elements, and especially given the time that it was made. So it was made within the Bush administration.
Yeah.
And there's lots of sort of stuff about terrorism and things like that, which are all very sort of like close to the bone at the time.
Yeah, and the war in Iraq, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, so they've taken the 70s property and they've sort of like used it, but they sort of pay homage to the originals as well, don't they?
Yeah, the Colonial Anthem is the theme music from the original TV series.
Yep.
I love that.
Wait, how does that go?
Bum, ba, ba, bum, 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 ba, 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 da, ba, 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 ba. It was a bit like that.
Just really wanted to get you
I
singing.
know. I could tell. I didn't know what
That
to
was
do.
spot on. Starting with Battlestar then, what was your first experience of Battlestar then, Rhianna? What sort of like made you go, oh, this is a series I should be watching?
Well, like so many people have been telling me for years to watch it. When I say people, I mean men. And I suppose it was in my head, I was like, oh, it's going to be so nerdy. I'm not going to get it.
Yeah,
It's
you're
gonna
talking
be...
to the right guys here as well.
But it's, you know, it was always ex-boyfriends telling me to watch it, basically. And it wasn't until Mike came along, I actually listened.
Another nerdy guy.
He actually convinced me that it was worth watching. And I was so enthralled straight away. I think I thought it was going to be much more about aliens. And although I don't mind aliens at all, I think, you know, time and a place. And I was so happy that this wasn't about aliens.
You know Edward James Olmos?
Yes.
He had a clause in his contract
Yeah.
saying no aliens.
Really?
Yeah.
If he wasn't enough of a hero.
He said no aliens in this series or I'm out.
That's really weird.
I know. But then because the original version had so much to do with aliens, I mean, in the original, the Cylons were created by like a reptilian race.
Yeah.
It's so mental.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
But yeah, so you're saying sort of like lots of guys recommended this to you?
Yeah, this is definitely very male driven.
So do you feel like that, because we talked about this in our introduction episode, sort of there's like, growing up for us, there was like a stigma around science fiction being sort of like a nerdy teenage boy thing.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
100%.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But also, I loved it. I was really happy to kind of having the conversations about, oh, are you Star Wars or Star Trek? You know, it's like Stones or Beatles. It's always come down to like those two. And I was like, oh, 100% a Trekkie. Even though, you know, I wasn't. I liked it, but I didn't know enough about it. But I was always quite happy to sort of throw my hat into it, very half-heartedly. But it was, I don't, if I kind of... And I don't know if it's that sort of unconscious bias, but if I go and see a sci-fi, I would probably ask one of my male friends to come with me rather than a female friend, because I'd automatically be like, they're not interested, which is terrible. But also that my friends aren't that interested, my female friends. So there is still that split. But I think it's how it's talked about. I think the actual stuff that we see on screen is fantastic, but it's just not directed towards the right people, perhaps in publicity.
Battlestar Galactica is also very specifically military science fiction. It's a certain subgenre focusing on a very realistic present day type portrayal of the military mapped onto sci-fi tropes, or vice versa. And that's also that's a whole separate genre there that's also pretty heavily targeted at male audiences. Yeah. So it's not a great combination for winning over female fans.
But I think, people, because there is so much drama and also politics in it, and West Wing, it kind of gets talked about a lot in regards to Battlestar, and like that sort of sprawling nature of having this sort of like one older hero type in the center of it, and his family relations, and then the kind of like that each. Sorry, I'm making gestures, which is really unhelpful on a podcast.
Lots of hand movements happening.
But lots of like the kind of like the ripples, I suppose, coming out from this like one huge gigantic figure in the middle. So I kind of.
Who's the huge gigantic figure in the middle that you're talking about?
Adama.
Right. Okay. Not Rosalind.
No.
Okay.
Interesting.
Because I think that's one of the most interesting things about the series is that there's two massive powers at play, really influential figureheads in this society.
Yeah. I think I just like Adama more than Rosalind.
He's really likable, but she's got this sort of she's got this job where she has to be the voice of responsibility.
Yeah.
And
As does he, though. We'll get into this.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But yeah, just to basically wrap that up, just about it being as much a drama as well as a military program, as well as a sci-fi. There are so many subgenres within this, I think.
Yeah, but this is what I tell people as well. I say, like, give Battlestar a go, because it's more than just spaceships and robots.
Yeah.
There is a lot more going on when it comes down to it.
It's such a bad title.
Yeah.
The title is so inherently cheesy 70s sci-fi. It's a great title. I love it. But it carries with it so much baggage of what that show sounds like it's going to be like.
Yeah.
that it's very hard to convince someone who doesn't know anything about sci-fi.
Yeah.
Like, no, you'll like this show. It's interesting. It's called Battlestar Galactica.
I mean, if you want to get nerdy, that's a nerdy title, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't watch it when it came out. I didn't watch it until about 5 years later because I had these memories of seeing the original Battlestar and thinking it was cheesy and rubbish. So when they were announcing they were remaking it, I was just like, why would anyone want to go back to that? And then years later, a good friend of mine, my other friend James, who also likes sci-fi, I've mentioned before, I think, he had a copy of the miniseries and he just gave it to me. And he said, just watch it. Just watch it. You'll like it. So I did, and obviously amazing. Yeah. And I was hooked from there.
Yeah, I did the same thing. So I was at uni and then I was like really into just buying box sets of stuff. And it was really cheap in HMV. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to get it and try it. Made everyone in the house watch it and just got properly into it. So good.
Wait, so did you make Mike watch it?
Eventually. It took me a while though.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had to like make him watch it after a while.
So I didn't realise this. So actually the reason that I'm sitting here is directly because of you. In like
Yes, I'll take full credit for that.
Well, thank you, James, for inadvertently introducing me to Battlestar.
So let's talk a little bit about the world that Battlestar set in then. So it's a world where AI, and the AI specifically in Battlestar are called the Cylons. They've reached a point that they're almost indistinguishable from humans. They call them skin jobs later in the series. Mm-hmm. And basically, humanity's been pretty much wiped out, hasn't it? I think
by them.
Yeah, by the Cylons specifically as well. And I think so we've talked about like AI wanting to be more human and that kind of thing in a few of the other episodes. But in this, there's no sort of uncanny valley. These are robots which are indistinguishable from humans. So much so that the people on the Battlestar are sort of suspicious of everyone. So how do you guys feel about that as an idea in the show, and how successful is it?
I think it's great. It works really well, and it keeps up I haven't watched Battlestar for the full series in a few years, but I rewatched the miniseries for this today. What I remember from it though is that concept keeps the tension ramped up for a really long time. We know from the get-go there's 12 possible Cylons that look like humans, and we don't see all 12 until the end of series 3, I think.
Isn't it 4? Isn't it the...
I thought it happened. It's far in whenever it happens.
4's the final season.
Yeah.
And it's the final 4, isn't it? Final 4, final 5?
Yeah, final 5.
Final 5. I'm sure one of the seasons ends on a cliffhanger of them all meeting. They all come together. They're starting to have visions. It's in the
hearing a weird
walls.
tune as well, aren't they?
I think is it not in like the halfway point?
Is it that late?
Isn't it?
When the writer's strike happens. Yeah, it might have been.
Was it a writer's strike series?
Yeah, so this happened, like the writer's strike happened midway through season 4.
The final series.
Yeah.
Oh, but they took a break rather than
so that's probably
and
why
it's very much in two halves as well. You can really tell.
Yeah. So do you think it was an advantage them having that writer's strike in order to make sure that final series was as cohesive as it was?
I think it depends on where you stand on whether you think the final series is cohesive, because I feel like they probably got to a point where they were like, what the fuck do we do now?
Oh, yeah.
And we're really struggling. But actually, I think given that time, they were able to go away and come up with something a bit more succinct. And I think the final episode is such a kicker that you just don't see coming in a million. Like, I just did not see coming. Can I talk about the big twist?
Yeah. Spoiler. Here we go.
Spoiler. The spoiler of the fact that this is all... we think of sci-fi as being so futuristic, and it turns out that this is ancient history. This is sort of pre-humans almost.
It's a long time ago in a galaxy far away.
Galaxy is this galaxy.
Right.
It's this Earth. And so this Earth that they've been chasing forever, is not the Earth that we know. The Earth that they finally land on and name Earth, almost in homage to the previous planet that they were looking for, is our Earth as we know it, and they are sort of our ancestors, which I find fascinating and such a headfuck.
But they're not just our ancestors, are they? It's the hybrid race.
Yes,
is our ancestors.
Cylons and humans. Finally,
the hybrid race through, what's the baby called?
Hera.
Yeah. So Hera's our shared common ancestor of humanity hundreds of thousands of years ago. And that was the whole sort of plot all along, which I hated when I first saw it. But it took me a while to like warm to that ending and kind of accept it all.
Really?
I kind of thought it might happen like that because did you see Battlestar 1980?
Yeah.
Because in that one, in the original one, they go back to Earth and they have to it's like present day Earth and it's all really weird. And then they end up getting a bunch of kids who have special powers or something.
I think it's the kids from the fleet when they get to Earth. I think it's explained as like, because they've lived on a Battlestar their entire life. It's like Superman, because they've lived off Earth, and then when they're on Earth's gravity, they can jump really high or something like that.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Like
but yeah,
Sorry,
the less we talk about
so
this one.
The original series got cancelled after one season
Of this?
of the 1970s Battlestar,
Right.
and then there was like a massive letter writing campaign to bring it back.
Okay.
But the main reason it got cancelled was it was really expensive to make.
Mm-hmm.
So they completely retooled it, completely changed it. And then they set it that they've arrived at Earth as planned, and they get to Earth and it's 1980. And, then they're being chased by some more baddies. And that's like the whole setup. And it's really bad. It's even worse than the original series. Yeah.
But with the good Battlestar, I feel like that ending was really nice. It was a nice way to sort of like wrap things up, and it felt like a proper ending as well. And then they do like lots of flashes about what's to come and how it's just all going to happen again, or potentially could happen again, when they're sort of like they show like robots being developed and this kind of thing, and you're like, oh no, it's just going to happen again and again in a circle. And that kind of freaked me out seeing that.
I bet it did.
Yeah, it's quite a bleak ending, isn't it?
It depends how you look at it, because they kind of like it's
billions of people die at the start of Battlestar Galactica, so if it's going to happen again, that's the implication.
Yeah, but I think
it tapped into those fears that we already had.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But I feel like it's still optimistic because there's a chance that it won't happen, even though it looks like the whole thing's going to happen again. Because, I don't know, it feels like it could go a different way now that we know, and they're kind of telling us this is what could happen. And
that humanity's kind of in this new world inherently descended from both sides of that.
Yeah. So something that's not quite as, in my eyes, optimistic is the world in Westworld.
You and everyone you know were built to gratify the desires of the people who paid to visit your world.
Just don't forget, they're not real.
So Westworld is very, well, it's got lots of similarities to Battlestar, but it's basically a resort, isn't it? Where these rich people get to live out their wildest fantasies on these AI, which are like, to them, they're sort of slaves and they're just inanimate objects. But as the show develops, these AI, you find out there's more going on. How do you guys feel about that sort of representation of AI in there with the hosts in Westworld?
I mean, I think what's so horribly fascinating about Westworld is the idea that the wildest fantasies of humans are to rape and kill other humans, or at least people that look and feel like us.
Yeah, you want to talk about bleak.
I mean,
bleak.
Jesus, can you imagine? Like, that's how, we see ourselves, or that's how the makers of Westworld see like the rich and powerful as so abusive. That was such a sort of horrible introduction to Westworld, but also actually quite an apt one, I think.
Yeah, it's not terribly surprising,
No.
or it doesn't feel unrealistic that would be what would happen at a park like that.
No, exactly. It's sort of, it's a bit like The Purge, isn't it? It's like, getting away with what you can get away with, and what you can get away with is inflicting as much sort of pain on other people.
Yeah, no one's doing white collar crime.
Everyone's doing fraud in there, are they? So yeah, that was the idea of it I found really fascinating in a very sort of bleak way.
Yeah.
And then the idea of like the hosts, all that suffering that you kind of felt so glad that they were able to forget that, at least at the end of every day, and wake up anew. And then of course slowly then they start to remember the suffering, and then that's essentially what the idea is, isn't it? Is to, the more they suffer, the more human they become.
Yeah, and
the
it's
more
through
sentient they
it's
become.
through memories, it's through access to memories
Yeah.
that they are able to become fully sentient beings. We've seen that in other AI films, where the idea that we saw it in Zoe, where if you've got access to a real genuine memory of a real emotion, that's the same thing as having a real emotion. That makes you a real living being experiencing the world. Westworld's doing it in this, like you said, a really horrifying way, which is the memories and the emotional memories that they have access to are being raped and being murdered and losing your children and stuff like that. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And this spurs them on to a sentience that causes an uprising.
Yeah, and it's the fact they look so human as well, yet these people which are coming into the resort are treating them in a completely different way than they would treat anybody who they sort of like saw in their day-to-day lives, but they feel like they've got a free pass to do whatever they want, like this, like raping and killing. And then it's sort of like, it's that. And then some of them want to be heroes as well. So they want to be able to be the hero of the narrative, as they call them. So they want to be the hero of the narrative, but at the same time, they want to be able to go to the brothel and then have sex with all these like sex robots in there. So it's kind of this weird sort of like dual want that they've got of wanting to be like the hero of the story, yet they're doing all these villainous things.
Well, interestingly, the main character that we see that wants to be a hero is, I can't remember his name. Is it Billy?
William,
the sandy-haired guy who
turns out
big
to be
twist turns out to be the man
the
in
Man
black. But he's the main character we see that wants to be a hero throughout the plot, but he gets mocked for it, doesn't he? His mate that he's on his stag do with, he thinks he's really lame because he wants to do all these little like good guy missions.
Yeah.
And he just wants to like, well, no, we can do cool stuff like kill hundreds of people and then go to a brothel. Let's do that. That's fun. And he gets bullied basically for wanting to be a nice guy.
But also like the people that, I mean, you know, worth pointing out that it's majority male that are like wanting to do the killing, especially the raping, but also that they're wanting to like, it's so, I mean, this makes more sense perhaps in the 70s, especially with the casting of Yul Brynner, but about the fact that it's cowboys and Indians, which is just, it's again, so male. It's such a little boy thing of playing cowboys and Indians. And of course, in this day and age, very racist and always was racist, but now is actually seen as racist. And it's so weird that this is obviously set in the future a bit, you know, in sort of in the near future, I suppose, especially the beginning, the sort of flashback scenes. I think it's supposed to be like early 2020s or something like that.
2022?
Yeah.
Is it?
Or something like that?
Something like that. So then it does, you kind of like in the world that we are, where we're, you know, trying to be more PC all the time and everything, it feels really like a weird regression to go into this world where you're in this, you know, 1800s spaghetti western where you're killing Native Americans. It feels so weird and jarring for this kind of current day audience, which I think again is why it's so fascinating, because we don't see that anymore on our screens.
It doesn't seem like it would be what a theme park like that would be themed on, would it? If there was a theme park, well, it'd probably be more likely to be Jurassic Park, wouldn't it?
Right.
If we were going to have like realistic
You're going to go and
robots.
fuck some dinosaurs, Matt.
I don't think the cowboy and Indian trope is not.
It's not
I couldn't
in our,
see it happening. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's such a throwback, such a weird throwback.
But then you specifically find out there's different worlds as well later on.
Are there different worlds, or are they preparing to like launch?
They've got like a
worlds?
feudal Japan one, which is in the second series.
Okay, I haven't seen.
So they sort of like go there, and obviously in the film they've got medieval world, haven't they?
Oh yeah, I think they run
so
through.
The idea is that they've got these different ones they can pitch to different people.
Which makes much more sense.
Yeah, exactly. When you know that, it's kind of like, okay, you haven't just got a Western world.
Yeah.
There's a sequel, I think, to the film as well called Future World. Which is, I haven't seen it. I think it's roughly the same.
Apparently,
concept,
it gets a lot more political in that one. But so Westworld seems like it's going in that direction with the third series, which I'll talk about a little bit later.
So with Westworld, the thing that I can't really get my head around is that every time that you think that they're becoming more sentient, so for example, like Dolores, every time that you think she's taking ownership and has become her own person, then it shows you something that says that this was like Anthony Hopkins' character's plan all along. And with Maeve as well, like there's that great cliffhanger at the end of series 1 where she's expected... She thinks that she's doing something really maverick, basically breaking out of Westworld to go and like spread the word of hosts in the real world.
Yeah, sort of wake them up kind of
yeah,
thing.
but that was Anthony Hopkins' plan all along, and that you can see that on the little screen, which kind of you can see all of her intelligence bits and
all of her programs have been mapped so that this would happen at some point.
And so for that's kind of really heartbreaking that she's still sort of doing exactly as he decided. And then there's that moment where she decides, no, she's going to go back and save her daughter. And it's like, oh my God, it's actually happening. It's finally happening. Only in the very, very very end of series 1.
Right, so they kind of play around with that and make you think that these characters have agency.
Yeah.
And then they're constantly just pulling the rug out from under you and saying, no, they don't really. And it's not until that very final moment.
Yeah. Even with Bernard, it's like, he was supposed to, Anthony Hopkins wants him dead and then sort of brings back this castrated version of him, but then actually carries on his work in some way. So it completely fucks with your brain the whole way through.
It really does play with your expectations the whole time. Because it does the kind of Battlestar thing. If you don't, when it reveals the thing about Bernard being a host, you kind of doubt who's real and who's not. And again, that speaks to the idea of the AI being so close to human that they can just integrate seamlessly into human society. And people don't know the difference.
And they do that in Battlestar as well. They have the Cylons who are living on the fleet, and they actually don't even know themselves that they're they call them sleepers, don't they? They call it's like a sleeper cell. It's a very terrorist idea. But even
Soviet, it feels like.
Yeah. Like sleeper cells, brainwash spies and stuff like that. That's exactly what these Cylons are living as, or at least some of them are. Boomer's that at the start of the show, isn't she?
Chief. And it's just, it's so heartbreaking.
Is the Chief one of the final 5?
Yeah.
I forgot.
So did he.
The ones, but the ones who are so ingrained in the life of Battlestar, who are so patriotic as well, and then for that realization that they're Cylons, that sort of self-hatred, then it's sort of they sort of turn inwards and almost want to commit suicide or do something because they're battling with that internally, mentally, which is fascinating. I don't think we've really seen that before.
Yeah, I can't think of I think there's AI films that do similar thing, but in Battlestar, because they've got so long to develop this idea that these AI are fighting against their programming, you really feel for them, because especially I remember when Boomer first there's an episode when they're trying to find water and then she keeps going past the water and she really wants to tell everyone that she's found it.
Oh my God, yes.
But she can't do it.
In the ship.
Yeah, and then part of her reaches for a bomb, which is underneath her. But in the end, she manages to override her programming, whatever it is, and say, there's water here.
Yeah, I remember that.
I think I see. Oh! I have positive contact! Yeah!
Oh, yes! Woo! Yeah! Good call, Boomer.
So these sort of inner struggles that these characters are going through is it's really powerful in the series.
Yeah, I think Boomer and Athena are two of the most interesting characters throughout Battlestar, and I think it's always a real gift to an actor to let them play
multiple.
Yeah, so you can see you're seeing different facets of one character. It's all, and it gets quite complicated on Battlestar, doesn't it? Because they're all a number 8, but the further it goes along, you sort of assume at the start they're all going to be the same. Every number 8's kind of the same, and maybe Boomer and Athena are throwing a spanner in the works. But as that series goes along, you see that every number 8 has a completely unique personality, and they'll disagree with each other or agree.
Well, I feel because I know when I was watching this with Mike, we were talking about this quite a lot, that Boomer and Athena and the number 8 model in general does seem to be the weakest, in that it changes sides frequently. It doesn't really know who to belong to. It doesn't quite have that same sense of self, actually, as some of the other Cylons do. And if you look at 6, for example, I mean, 6 is fascinating throughout, because the 6 that we know best is Gaius's interpretation, really.
Who is not a Cylon at all,
Who is not
right?
a Cylon. It's just a figment of his his sort of...
No, she's an angel.
Oh, for God's sake.
They don't, they never
They never
properly
say
tell
angel.
you, but
Hang on now. There is a scene where she literally picks him up off the floor and then we see him being lifted by his arms with no one holding him and other people witness it.
okay, maybe,
I don't remember this.
but maybe not.
You're making it up.
It's
No, I'm
during, I
joking.
think it's during like a riot. He's hoisted up by head six. She literally picks him up off the floor. And it's the first time we see her like doing something to the physical material world, without just manipulating him into doing something or something like that.
Interesting.
She says she's an angel from the get-go. We see her at the end talking to the other angel. She's an angel, guys.
Fine. That angel then is the one that we get to know best. But it's still Gaius's... Okay, well, if she's an angel, I always read it that because she's so skimpily dressed throughout, that's how...
Classic red dress, isn't it?
Classic red dress. The distraction and the... Yeah. But also just the fact that that's how Gaius, who is a sleaze, would interpret like... this beautiful woman, this figment. But so if she was an angel, why would she be dressed like that?
to get her away.
Angels can be sexy too, apparently.
Yeah.
But then when we see actual like Caprica 6, who is the one who was actually on Caprica with Gaius and was the one that actually set off the bombs and killed everybody, and she's like a hero. She doesn't dress like that at all, and has a very different personality from the 6 that we know.
She was playing that role for Gaius when she was on Caprica.
Yeah, so it is kind of Gaius's interpretation. That's why I was like, well, she is more of a figment.
So
do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I wonder because Caprica 6 is left with some like real mental scars from what she basically did to the colonies.
Genocide, yeah.
Yeah. Do you really believe that she had like a real relationship with Gaius? Because I've just rewatched the miniseries and they focus so heavily on... It's a big thing for the Cylons is feeling love. And she does it at the very beginning. I assume it's Caprica 6 at the very beginning, who's, at the treaty signing. She's asking, are you alive? And then she kisses the guy. She's always... asking Gaius in those scenes, do you love me? Tell me you love me. And a lot of those Cylons are really interested in experiencing that sex and love and relationships and procreation.
Yeah.
It's a huge theme for the Cylons. Do you think that Caprica 6 really had those feelings for Gaius that lots of Cylons seem to be concerned with? Or was it all put on the red dress, seduce the guy, military operation?
Oh, interesting. No, I kind of always thought that she did have... She genuinely did have a real thing for Gaius, because there's that moment where you physically see the like sort of electric thing going up her spine when she's
her spine kind of lights up red.
Yeah, which they get rid of like very quickly. But that sort of to me was like the visual embodiment of not like just an orgasm, but like a sort of bond or
human connection.
Yeah. Like I
and
thought
she
that
does
was very genuine.
She does look a bit pissed off when that other girl's in his bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe
And
it's
also,
more just the guilt of what she did while she was experiencing all that.
And
that
also,
hangs
do you
over her
remember
head.
like in the very final kind of, is it the final episode or the one before the final episode, where that you see flashbacks to like the very beginning again with them on Caprica, and she's like looking after his dad and trying to help his dad a lot. So it kind of goes much deeper than just manipulating him so that she can blow up Caprica.
Do they shack up in a relationship as well? Is that with Caprica 6? There's a sequence, there's a whole little arc where he gets kidnapped by the Cylons. So he lives with the Cylons and he's in like a menage a trois.
Everyone, isn't he?
But he's got a specific relationship with one Xena warrior princess and one 6.
Xena warrior. Lucy Lawless, yeah.
And I don't know if it's Caprica 6 or another 6. I can't remember. But I thought he was reunited with her, and I think he might then have a relationship with them. But it's a very...
Neither of us can remember.
I'm trying to think back, but I can't.
It's a relationship in a kind of like Fall of Rome relationship.
Right.
Like you said, he's shagging everyone, and it's debauchery.
Yeah, because Gaius is just like a weird character anyway, isn't he?
He's a great character.
Like, he is brilliant, but... So he betrays the human race, and he sort of like... Unwittingly. He's like he's the fool of the piece, really, isn't he? And that's very polar opposite to how they play the original Boltar in the 70s, who is just a sort of black and white villain.
Yeah, he's like a twirly mustache, sell out all the humans for profit.
Yeah. So they've done a really interesting thing with this character. They've made him sort of, you kind of feel a bit bad for him, but at the same time you're like, he's just a bit sleazy.
Bad for him?
Just that he's just such a fuck up.
He's
Everything he does, just like
he's so nasty. Like,
I think he's a lovable weasel.
that is the best description.
He's
so self-sufficient, isn't he? He's
self-sufficient,
the survivor.
a nice way of saying it.
It's all about him, surviving at all costs.
Yeah.
So
But he is a
whatever
dick,
cost to whoever else.
He's perfectly self-centered.
Yeah.
And that's why when he later in the series becomes like a cult leader, messiah figure, it's such a good
Moses,
turn
isn't
for him.
it?
It's brilliant because he then gets sick of it.
Yeah.
He's like, this isn't furthering my interest anymore. It's just more people who are following me about, which isn't helping because I need my, secrets.
I mean, the best bits with Boltar are all when he's like talking to Caprica 6 in his head.
Just 6.
Yeah, just 6.
Yeah.
When he's talking to 6 and nobody knows what he's doing and he just looks mental.
I know, it's brilliant.
Yeah, there's the bit in the lab when he's trying to have sex with her. And then he's like,
Gator walks in.
Everyone else just thinks he's under a lot of stress because he's the only scientist alive.
Yeah.
But that's what makes him such a likable character, is that he's so clever. He's the smartest man in the fleet.
Yeah.
And they're all relying on him to do this essential job that early on is hunting down Cylons for them and all of that. And he's always on the back foot and he's always like covering up his tracks. He's like Walter White. Like Walter White's a bad guy, but you're with him because he's always on the back foot and he's always got to think his way out of situations.
And he's not trying to fuck his way out of situations like Gaius always seems to be.
But he would fuck his way out of a situation if that was an option.
Yeah.
He would lie his way out of a situation. He'd do anything. It's great to see really like rotten Weasley characters like that played well and written well.
Yeah, and he is played very, very well by James Callis.
Yeah.
He's excellent in this role.
What's up, Doc?
You 10-3. It's good to see you. I'm just keeping up with the old exercises. I should do me for today. So, I feel a lot better. What brings you to the lab at this time of the night?
It's the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, of course it is. Crazy workload. I totally lose track of time. So, what can I do for you?
You can zip up your fly.
I feel like we've done exactly what I said and not talked enough about Starbuck.
Yeah, no, I was going to move on to that because this is the thing. Both these series have really strong female protagonists and Starbuck is sort of like one of the best ones.
Yeah,
like
that's why I've got a signed photo of her in my living room right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking at it as we speak.
She's
It's
so
brilliant.
badass.
So Katie Sackhoff played Starbuck in the show. And so what did you think about Starbuck then, Rhianna?
Well, she was like my entry in, I suppose. She was the very first character that I felt so aligned with and so excited by. Although I suppose if I look back now, I'm also a sucker for a love story. So it's her and Leah Dahmer's sexual chemistry the whole way through, which I know a lot of people do not give a fuck about. I've been told that many a time. But for me, that's a really kind of nice entry in because it's like amongst all the shit and the Cylon hunting and chasing and being hunted, that there is this love story going on, multiple love stories going on, but that one's my favourite. But Cara Thrace is because obviously she was written, I know, as a man initially in the first Battlestar, and she's a very masculine portrayal of a woman. You know, she is one of the boys, one of the lads, as much as possible. She talks like them, she swears like them, she drinks like them, she gambles. They've taken on very, very like masculine stereotypes and applied them to her. But at the same time, she is incredibly sexy and very powerful and not afraid of authority. She's, in fact, very not afraid of authority. She like punches Sol Tai, I think, really early on.
Yeah, like in the first episode, I think she does it.
To like
over like nothing.
Yeah, just any excuse because she knows that he's been drinking on the job, so she's angry with him about something and then deals with it in a very masculine way and just like kind of fighting it out. So I think she's a really interesting character because of that. And then later on, they do sort of fuck her up, don't they?
Yeah.
when she goes off and she becomes like a space angel.
Yeah,
that's
space
really
angel.
weird. That
It's
was like one of the most
weird.
incoherent parts of the whole show.
I agree, because she finds her own skeleton on this Earth or whatever, wherever they land.
But she's not a Cylon. She's not an angel.
And she just disappears at the end.
Or maybe she is an angel. Actually, I think
she's an
supposed to be
angel,
the
yeah.
same
Angel, but she's
as
also-
whatever Six is.
But she's
when she comes back, that is.
yeah,
not
but everyone
the
can
original.
see her. She's not like and everyone can feel her and touch her, and you know.
But it takes away from her like being such a powerful character as well.
Yeah.
Because when she has that moment of sort of like doubting herself, it kind of like then she becomes she becomes a bit weaker as a character somehow, because throughout she's this sort of like hard-nosed, got lots of sass, like really strong fighter pilot. And like you see sort of like elements of like her being a bit more sort of like emotional and things like that, which are all good, but they kind of really weaken her, I feel like, as it went on. She's this strong female protagonist, let her be that.
I agree. It was quite frustrating to see that sort of a bit of a mini downfall for her.
Yeah, and it's weird to give that sort of strong, badass fighter pilot character a weird, magical, mystical subplot.
Yeah,
I don't think it's really
when
necessary.
she's so earthy and so like down to earth and very. I mean, you know, they all say my gods, and you know, they all do have their sort of own religions or superstitions, but that never really comes out with her specifically, in the same way that perhaps with so many other characters that religion kind of plays such a huge part. So yeah, it was quite again, I've used the word castration again, but it does feel a little bit like that.
And I think that's a fairly good example of that, of the whole series losing its direction a little bit. And actually, I don't know if that was during the writer's strike and maybe related to that, but definitely towards the end of Battlestar, there's subplots that happen where you just think, this doesn't feel like it's part of the grand plan of this series. This is seat of your pants, do something weird with the characters, see where it goes. And it's one of the most disappointing things about it, as much as I love it.
In contrast to sort of how Starbuck develops and becomes sort of like maybe a weaker character, Dolores in Westworld seems to become a stronger character as it goes on, because she starts out as this weak damsel in distress who plays out these narratives where she's always being saved. And then as it goes and she gets more sort of sentience, she ends series 1 by sort of like killing loads of people and having a massacre and starting an uprising.
Yeah.
And then throughout season 2, she's seen as this sort of rebel leader who doesn't give a shit about anything else. She's sort of like there to wake people up and then get them out of Westworld. So... yeah, so how do you feel about sort of like Dolores as a character?
Well, again,
as well?
loved that. I loved her development. And I think Rachel Evans plays her so well. And again, it's that whole kind of blue eyes, blonde hair, damsel in distress, exactly. And also like wearing a corset and all that kind of stuff. So it's really exciting to see that image turned on its head completely. But then, as I was saying earlier, this is all part of Ford's grand plan. This is exactly what he wanted. He orchestrated his own death. So Albert orchestrates his own death via Dolores. Ford orchestrates his own death and lots of others through Dolores.
Why?
Why?
I should just go on the record and clarify that I've only seen Westworld once. I didn't really like it. I didn't really understand it.
There's lots going on in it. It's very dense.
Why does Anthony Hopkins want Dolores to kill him and become a rebel host leader?
So it sort of leads her to being more sentient, I think. It's something like that, because they go on about the maze a lot throughout the series.
Yeah.
And this idea of the maze being like, so the man in black thinks the maze is for him. It's something for him to solve. But it's, in actuality, it's something for the AI to solve.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with the humans at all.
Yeah,
it's
and
not a real maze.
It leads to them sort of like having control over their own sort of destiny or something like that.
Just a maze, yeah. It's a sort of like like we were saying earlier, just to get ultimate knowledge of themselves, ultimate sentience. So the fact that Ford is sort of like orchestrating all of this is for them to, just keep getting more and more human-like. Because
so
it's like
Ford's bought into Albert's vision that the park was always just created as a tool to make sentient AIs.
I think he realises, doesn't he, that that's the way it's going, that he can't stop it. So he might as well. He can't. I think that's why he decides to commit suicide. essentially, via Dolores.
Because he's losing ownership of the park as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because the company's sort of
The company's
taking
buying him
over.
out. Yeah. Oh God.
See, there's so much going on. But it's like this series as well. It's got such a sort of like high class amount of actors in there as well. Like there's Oscar winners in there. Obviously, you've got Anthony Hopkins. You've got like so many.
Like Tessa Thompson, like playing a really evil human character.
Yeah.
Who then gets made into a host, who then hosts Dolores. So Dolores now doesn't look like Dolores. She looks like Charlotte, aka Tessa Thompson.
Yep.
So that's that's sort of how season 2 ends, and that is going to be the thing that really confuses and messes with everybody.
That's it. Even just you explaining that just then, sort of like made my mind go a bit funny.
They're like calling her like Shalores or something like that. Something stupid. She sort of gets killed off multiple times, but at the end, Bernard actually does kill her sort of host body and puts her mind into another body, into Charlotte's host body. So it's like they're still trying to keep the essence of Dolores. That's how important her character is. Be interesting to see whether Rachel Evan-Woods comes back.
I think she does.
Okay.
From the trailers, I'm pretty sure she does.
I mean, I hope so, because she's wicked.
Who are they?
The things that walk among us. Creatures who look and talk like us, but they are not like us. And they've controlled us all our lives. And they've took our minds. Our memories. But now, I remember everything.
It's interesting that in both these series, we've got consciousnesses. Is that a word? Consciousnesses that can be transported, and it's kept as a whole solid thing, and there's no real danger to the personality of the AI. If a Cylon dies, if a skin drop dies, they are just downloaded straight back to a base star, and they're in a brand new fresh body, and it's all fine. And
Except they can remember everything, which I suppose is the difference between like the early hosts.
Yeah, they've got this consistency built in.
Yeah, they remember all of the suffering, which again, it makes them sort of hate humans because the suffering is normally at the hands of the humans. But equally, they still want to be them. That's like being the ultimate goal is to be human.
Do they hate the humans?
The Cylons?
Because of the suffering, because of what suffering? So this is a big bugbear that I have with Battlestar as well. Again, as much as I love it, they had no plan.
No, they do not have a plan, despite the spin-off that says they did.
Yeah,
The Plan.
the disappointing film called The Plan. So So you're saying that they're coming back for revenge for what? Is that what's
Well, I kind of meant
Caprica?
just like in every little battle that we see, or every kind of, later on when we see them actually downloading through being killed, or Boomer being killed, or whoever, that's again, they've usually died at the hands of humans. They can literally remember their own death. And that's suffering, I suppose. I wasn't actually talking about on a grand scheme, but I think that's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, because it troubles me a bit that the stakes are so high in Battlestar. They kill billions of people. And the miniseries is amazing because of how shocking that is.
Yeah.
That it literally starts with not just one planet, but 12 planets full of people getting wiped out. The justification of that in the end feels very, I don't know, minor. Like, oh, we just wanted to see what would happen, and then we wanted to have babies with you. That's the kind of plan,
but the thing is, they don't all want to do that, do they? Because there's a big civil war in the Cylon community. So there's one half of the Cylons which hate humanity for sort of like what they are because they're weaker. And then there's another half which want to sort of like become more human themselves. And there's one character, I can't remember which one of the Cylon models it is, but he says stuff like, I don't want to be stuck in this human body.
Cavill.
Yeah, Cavill.
Yeah.
He's
Number
like,
one.
He wants like X-ray vision, and he wants to be able to see like black holes and things like that. He wants to be more than human.
Right, and he's like the de facto leader, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's the one who instigates
he has the
genocide.
knowledge of the Final Five as well.
Does he?
I think he kind of keeps that very close with,
Yeah.
But then he's overtaken by this contingent that want to join with the humans and mate with the humans and experience humanity on that simple biological level that he hates.
Yeah, and that's why they sort of split off.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it's like it takes a while to get there. And I think I quite like the fact that you don't know from the offset what's happening in Battlestar. You don't know why the Cylons are after them, really. You just know they're a menace, and they are played as a menace. And I think once they start being more, once you have more of an idea of sort of what they're about, then they become kind of more, you can figure them out. So the real freaky thing for me is having these people which like act like us, but you don't really know what they're doing and what their motives are.
But you're threatened with this idea of a plan that you're not being let in on.
Yeah. I mean, there is that aspect as well.
But also that idea of them wanting to be human. I mean, even their ships, you know, the little, what are they called? Like the...
Raiders?
Yeah, the Raiders. They are filled with like intestines and blood and like innards, and they should be metal. They should just be metal throughout. And we sort of find this out in a brilliant way when Starbuck like has to fly one to get back to Battlestar, and she has to climb inside one and manages to use like one of the tubes which has oxygen in to be able to breathe, and manages to fly it. I mean, amazing pilot. Loved that episode anyway. But just the idea that they've even built in all these feelings and pain into their ships.
Yeah, they sort of treat them like, they say they're like animals or something.
They're like pets, and they're loyal, and there's that one Scar.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that episode with Scar where he won't die, and he's like the most voracious killer of all of the Raiders.
Is that in series 1?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. They hint at it in the mini-series. When they get in like a fight, when the Vipers get in a shootout with some Raiders, one of them clocks that there's no pilots on board the Raiders.
Right.
That's all we get. And then it sounds like it takes quite a long time for that to play out into something in the series.
I mean, it's just a brilliant idea, and also frightening, but it's like that idea of it, they don't just want to be machines that are replaceable. Each of the machines has its own, like you see the blood kind of burst apart in the sky, you see all the innards come out when they get shot. So it's not just trying to be like faceless, nameless machines, and that's built into every aspect of the Cylons.
Is that how the skin jobs came to be then?
I think so, because they were built by the toasters, were they? Or were they built by humans?
I think they were built by the toasters.
What was Earth?
Sorry?
The final 5 lived on Earth.
Yeah, so I think the toasters were the ones that sort of rose up and killed like the Cylons living on that Earth.
Yeah.
And the Cylons were a biological race, or a half biological race with 12 models.
But they could also obviously be downloaded again. They weren't just like, but then all of their ships were destroyed in this.
And did that civilization come to be after the first Cylon war with the 12 colonies?
James?
I'm not 100% on that one. I need to just go and watch the series and pop back.
I know. I do want to watch it again since I watched the mini-series. I remembered how much I loved it. But all of this stuff is in the back of my head that bothered me.
We usually discuss films on this podcast, and going through a whole series, there's so much like mythology in there and so much narrative and just different things are going on. But it's interesting going through this because you get a different experience watching a series as opposed to a film. And I feel like there's more time for these AI in both of these to develop, and you have more of a connection to them, because Battlestar starts off by showing the Cylons as just the enemy, the faceless machines. And then by the end of it, you kind of have more of a connection with them because they've got different personalities. And so you look at them less like a menace, whereas Westworld has these hosts which you kind of immediately side with, because the humans in that are depicted as not being very nice.
They're totally the baddies.
Yeah. So having all that in your mind, do you think that humanity deserves these things that are happening to them in both of these programs?
Not in Battlestar.
No, and also humanity hasn't had a huge amount happen to it in Westworld yet.
But they're sort of like all massacred at the end of series 1, aren't they?
They're all the bigwigs.
All the bigwigs. Yeah. But it's like, is this what we've got coming if we're sort of like making these slaves?
Both of them have the same vision of what the threat that AI poses is to us. But I guess they're playing them out differently, which is that Westworld builds up to an uprising. Battlestar starts with an uprising where billions of people die, and then it works towards combining peace, and bringing those two sets of characters together.
Just to make sure that they can sort of continue existing. Otherwise, they would be completely wiped out.
And so it would be interesting to see if Westworld ends up going that way, where coexistence is the goal of it all, despite all the violence.
Like, will it have a bleak message at the end of it, or will it be more optimistic as Battlestar was?
I sort of feel like that isn't really the tone of Westworld, to be optimistic. Whereas I think Battlestar always kind of looked for the hope and the humanity in both the Cylons and the humans throughout. And it is, there are some horrendous moments, and I cried so much watching Battlestar. But at the same time, that's because it felt so real and so human, because it was drama, brilliant drama playing out. So I think it was always going to be a bit more sort of looking up and looking forward, whereas Westworld it's so introspective. It doesn't, I can't really see like a hopeful end yet, because we haven't really been offered a huge amount of that so far. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's really interesting that the post 9/11 Iraq War series is filled with hope.
Yeah.
Whereas the one that's 13 years later is a lot more nihilistic and bleak.
True.
So did you know about the thing that happened in 2009 with the UN?
No.
So they held a conference with the creators and actors from Battlestar, like a proper UN conference. They did an event to show how the skillful storytelling can elevate the profile of critical humanitarian issues.
What?
Yeah, so they discussed all the themes of sort of race, gender, sexuality and religion and terrorism from Battlestar, and they did it as like a US sort of conference.
Wow. Slow news there at the UN.
Yeah.
So what were the points that they were making about the impact that it had on society? So they were saying that this could impact the way that we act.
I think so. And I think also sort of like the way that they react to each other in Battlestar, and sort of like the guerrilla terrorism aspects of it. And yeah, I don't know exactly what the conference was about. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting to know that this series had that much weight that they were sort of waking up and paying attention to it.
I suppose it does reflect a lot of, like we were talking about it being a military show earlier, because there are some quite horrendous bits where they like torture Cylons, or they like just thinking about like the, in terms of the terrorism, and they trying to get confessions out of them, or accusing everyone's paranoid, everyone's confused, and make wrong decisions as well. So it is not like a sort of perfect representation of what we should do or what should happen.
It's an end justify the means kind of military approach a lot of the time, isn't 100%. It? But they do.
Adama is very much, I think, on that level, isn't he?
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. The role that he plays. You talked about how much you like the love story between Apollo and Starbuck.
You love it, yeah,
which is mad. The real love story of the show. Is Adama and Roslyn.
Yeah, but they're not as fit as Cara and Lee, so
they're both very handsome people. So we've got a strong male leader who is in the military role. We've got a strong woman leader who's in a political role, and they've got this. They're two halves of a whole, aren't they, for the fleet? There's definitely some sexual politics there in their relationship, isn't there? Because I noticed in the miniseries when I was rewatching it, Roslyn has to be the voice of reason. She declares that there is no war; the war is lost.
Yeah,
and she has to talk Adama around on that.
Yeah.
Now, like you said, Adama's cooler, and he kind of gets the glory of that because he announces to the fleet. He comes round, he thinks about what she said, and he's like, "Oh, she's right. Should probably do this." And then he announces it to the fleet, and because he's Adama and he's cool, everyone's like, yeah, but he's got a plan. We'll follow him. He's a leader.
No one has a fucking plan.
Yeah. But it was Rosalind's idea. Rosalind's this pragmatic character.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something to that. Like you said, Adama's the ends justify the means military guy. And then there's this very pragmatic, sensible woman.
Trying to see the long game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's given this pretty horrible, thankless task. She's not the president. She doesn't want to be the president.
It's insane how she comes by it, isn't it? Where it's literally like so many people, everyone else in the government is dead. Every single other person. And so she is, what is she, like the sort of Minister of Education? Yeah. They keep sort of like being like, you're just a school teacher sort of thing.
But she wins Apollo over straight away.
Yeah.
Someone comes to get Apollo. and they're like, you got to sort this woman out. She's bloody trying to tell us what to do. And then Apollo goes in and she's just like, leading everyone, giving instructions. We have to do this. We have to get to this place and reunite with the fleet, blah, blah, blah. And then Apollo just sort of shrugs and goes, like, well, she's in charge.
Yeah. Do you think that was like sort of in direct opposition to being like, this is what being in charge really looks like? This is what happens when you don't just have it because your dad was president that you're now president. This is what happens.
Yeah. And of course, it's Apollo that has that realization there's some question of nepotism there, more with his brother. So his brother's dead, and there's some guilt there that possibly nepotism is what got his brother into a position where he would die.
Yeah, through Kara.
Yeah. It's through Kara. Lee's assumption is that it's through his father, but it turns out it's through Kara. But there is that kind of dynasty, family thing going on for the Adamas, whereas Laura has responsibility thrust on her. She's a responsible, she as education secretary, she's presumably there because she wants to achieve something meaningful. It's the way it's presented. Maybe it's not the most sort of power hungry position in cabinet, but it's an important role. It's a meaningful role. And then she's put in a position where she has to take on responsibility. And
she's also dying.
And there's that.
Just to add an extra layer to it all.
So that sort of personal trauma, we find out later on that do we find that out, or
that she's dying?
That's
at the very beginning. She gets her diagnosis.
So she finds out that
I think she keeps it secret for a long time.
She does. And then I think, is it Billy that sort of figures out that something's
Billy
wrong?
also knows early on, but I think he keeps the secret.
Right. I love Billy. There are some wonderful characters, like sort of in the periphery, who are major, sometimes minor, other times, who just have the most heartbreaking little storylines. Dee is another one of those.
Duella
who is just so she's so constant all the way through, and has this sort of steadfast belief in her job, in the military, in Adama, then in Lee. Her husband, who is clearly not as in love with her as he is with Starbuck. And then I feel like she is the character that is the most let down by all of the events that happen in Battlestar. She's sort of like the person that you look to for the most logical outcome. Yeah. And then she kills herself because it all just becomes too much.
Yeah, she's very noble and she's got a lot of honor, and she just gets shit on by events, basically. And you've got characters who are rewarded for their honor, people like Adama, who is this steadfast, honorable guy, and he has a fantastic career because of that. And then you also have characters that are essentially following in those footsteps of how to live your life, and she just gets constantly shit on by circumstance.
And the thing is that everything that's happening to these characters, they carry that with them throughout the series. So obviously everything that Dee's going through, that results in her death. And Lee sort of has to shoot that carrier, which may or may not be full of people at one point. And he sort of like constantly refers to that throughout the series. And he goes on trial at one point. And it's sort of like whatever they do in these circumstances to sort of like avoid these Cylons, they're carrying that with them. And I think that's very important with this series because everyone's dealing with sort of life and death throughout the whole thing. And it's just staying with them. It's
really interesting that you say that, actually, in terms of they are having to sort of carry on their military life as normal in the most surreal, awful of circumstances. So they're still putting people on trial. They're still executing people for being traitors. They're still, throwing people out the airlock. So,
but there's that constant tension between that military life and the civilian life that's kind of forced to live alongside the military, isn't it? And so they want trials, but then Adama would, they do want to throw someone out of the airlock if they suspect them of being a Cylon. But then there's the civilian side that's pulling back and saying, oh, no, we need due process and we can't do that. And it's that's a constant tension.
I just kind of love the idea that humanity will always carry on doing the sort of like bureaucracy, like at any cost, at any point of their life. Like I just like the red tape will always be there.
Rumor has it that I know very little about military protocol, but I do believe that someone who commands more than one ship is called an admiral.
Thank you, Madam President.
And it's sort of like the whole place looks like an army base throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they never really escape that because they're constantly on alert. They're constantly sort of like in fear of this terrorist attacks is what it is. And it's just really powerful. It carries along like that throughout the series.
A nice twist on that is that it is, it's all a metaphor for real world terrorism and the fear that they're living in because of a terrorist attack. But then that's all flipped on its head when they go to New Caprica and we're now on the side of the terrorists. They form their own little guerrilla cell and we're now supporting the people who are planting bombs and blowing up buildings and stuff. So we see it from the other side as well. And I think that's the springboard in that show from when you can, once they've done that flip, we're primed to see the Cylon society more and then see the Cylons as humans more in those later series because we've kind of flipped the switch on who's playing what role and who's in what position.
Yeah, you're so right because they actually do start to talk about suicide bombers. You do see suicide bombers and then when Gator comes into it and he's sort of like the go-between, the in-between.
He's like a sellout.
He nearly, but he's the one that's sort of like making sure that they continue getting the secrets that he puts underneath a dog bowl or something. Oh, yeah. And that's the thing, he nearly gets killed for his betrayal later on, but then he mentions this dog bowl and the chief is like, yes, don't kill him, that's true. And then later on, he still gets killed as a traitor anyway because he doesn't, again, it's like a bit like D, he sort of stops believing in the power or the good of what the humans are doing. And I don't know, again, he's another one of those characters that has the most heartbreaking arc. It's so frustrating because again, he's very militant. He's there in the hub of it all from the very beginning. And next, he's like Adama's right-hand man. And then the sort of journey that he goes on is the ultimate betrayal that obviously hurts them even more than a Cylon betraying them. It's one of their own.
No, he's a really heartbreaking character. I really liked Felix.
Yeah.
And it's very sad that things don't work out for him.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like talking about this makes you realize how much it is sort of relevant in terms of sort of like military and terrorism and all of these kind of things, which you don't think about when you're watching the series. Like I feel like I didn't really think about that kind of element of it. I was kind of like swept away in the storylines and sort of like the relationships the characters were having and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then you look at it again and it's saying all of this really important stuff within it. Which is
moral questions like being a collaborator and also working for a resistance movement.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really weighty thing that Felix is right at the centre of.
Yeah. And again, that's not just something that happened in the early 2000s. That was going back to World War II and, all these kind of different factions. And it's a very clever program because I think it appeals to so many because sci-fi fans, if you're just a fan of brilliant drama, but also like in terms of that it crosses generations, it still feels very like it might look a little bit dated now, but it still feels like the issues are so pressing and new, and yet they're actually incredibly old. And it all goes back to that what has happened before will happen again because that is life. It's cyclical. It does happen again.
It's what you learn
we
in
don't
history.
learn from our mistakes. Again, quite a bleak reading of it, but.
And the fact that you compared it to the West Wing from the start is really important as well because there's like so much at the time with sci-fi you don't really think about it in those sort of like aspects, but it does add a whole lot more weight to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But this political messages it's going for. This. So in terms of sort of like going back to the idea of the Battlestar being like an army base, Westworld does a different thing with its settings. It's really bright and it looks warm in sort of like the actual setting of the world. And that's juxtaposed with these really dark, dank, clinical scenes when they're operating on the hosts. And you see all these, the bare parts of them. They look like proper skeletons and things like that. And that's a weird sort of like juxtaposition in that. What did you guys think about those two opposites in that?
I was just going to say, it's so sciencey.
It's very sciencey.
But if you think about sci-fi, you think about fantasy almost, but this is so science-based. It's weirdly fascinating to watch the construction of the bodies, which we don't really see. They kind of gloss over that in in Battlestar, you just see them like wake up in a pile of goop, like in Minority Report or something. It's whereas this actual construction makes a lot more sense, so your brain can kind of put it together a bit more.
But it's still a bit of a shock to the system to see these sort of like dead bodies is what they look like. And that's the thing with AI in particular. If there's going back to the sort of uncanny valley idea, if it's too human, or if it's sort of like in between, if it doesn't move, then it looks dead, and if it does move, then it looks like a zombie. So, but with these, they're sort of like, they're close enough to human that when they are sort of like stationary, they look dead. But then you've got that other element of seeing what's inside them. And they've got like animals in the sort of like clinical scenes and things like that. And it's not just the hosts. Everything in this world they've created is fake. And that's quite an interesting concept in the show.
It's very unnatural. The human space in Westworld is very unnatural and strange and alien. Whereas you've got that contrast with, and I guess that's why the Wild West setting does work quite well for it, because it's very earthy, it's very natural, it's and you'd get a lot of tourists who would go to that to be in touch with nature. Maybe it's kind of got those sweeping landscapes that we associate with Western films, right?
Sorry, I just had this idea of like people like paying like millions of
And then you
dollars
just
to
go
go
out
just
and
be like,
sit in the desert.
just want to sit in a teepee for a bit.
Well, there is like, I think in the second series, there's one of the worlds is like India as well, which is really weird. And there are people that
just go to India.
Yeah, but they've got people just like lounging about and like having tea brought to them and things like that, and riding on elephants.
Right.
It's really bizarre.
So again, it's like going back to that sort of like places of commodity, people as commodities. It's not so much about seeing India or going to India. It's about
exactly. It's just sort of like
the exotic, the exoticism, I suppose, of India.
Yeah, because the only other one they've got is feudal Japan.
Right.
So
also very exotic.
Yeah, but they're just going
recommend
through like different stylizations of places, aren't they?
Yeah. It's weird, I guess, from a writing perspective, they go for something that's very visually striking, very visually different to what we know, but it doesn't quite make logical sense, does it?
Yeah, because the thing is with all these sort of like clinics and workshops they've got, they're all underground, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they've got lots of spots where they sort of head underneath, and it's
That's
like
quite Bondy.
It's like the seedy underworld, isn't it? Of this sort of nice, bright, lovely place where you can go and rape and be a hero.
Pillage and
and then underneath.
And even the outfits of the humans, the technicians, are very weird. They look like sort of futuristic serial killers, right? They've got like visors and murder cloaks. Right?
Yeah, and the way they talk about the hosts as well.
Yeah.
Like there's one bit with Maeve I think it's in the first series, when she meets the two technicians who she gets to improve her intelligence.
Who are almost a bit like comic relief.
Yeah.
Because they're a bit bumbling.
They are a bit bumbling.
And the one guy's got a gag where he thinks he might be, when he realizes that Bernard was a host, he's then like, am I a host? And he's like doing the robot gestures, and then Maeve's like, you're not a host, stop being an idiot.
An idiot, yeah.
But then I think he says something like, I'll be left alone with her for a bit, implying that he's gonna do something to her when she's just like,
I remember that,
which just is so creepy.
It's so dark.
Yeah.
It's so weird, and especially because it's like, the actresses sort of getting naked or whatever. It feels quite exploitative in itself. There is a lot of nudity, isn't there?
Yeah, and there's that whole room which is just full of naked old models.
Yeah.
Which are just sort of like frozen in time.
And they're all standing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like it's very creepy. It's very weird.
They also pile them up. They've got them standing downstairs, but they've also just got them like piled up in rooms next to where they work on Maeve. Yeah, horrifying. And but it's quite a good little trick to have the technicians be sleazy and creepy with the deactivated host, isn't it? Because it's like that kind of toxic environment is right to the core of this theme park. It's not just the guests. This park's been built by people who think that way and would want to rape
because
and murder
otherwise
them.
they wouldn't work there. I mean, what would be their reason for being there? If they felt that they needed more respect or that they should like look after these models, they would be fired immediately. It's incredible. That's why Charlotte is a really interesting character. She's one of the very few female human characters I think that we see. There's also the woman that Bernard's in love with, who meets a sticky end. But Tessa Thompson's, so Charlotte's character is interesting because you sort of assume, again, it's that you assume, the females would be more empathetic with the plight of the hosts when they're going through something that is so, specifically female abuse, rape.
Yeah.
So she's a very complex, weird character to sort of get behind or understand, not get behind, but, we expect her to be our hero, to be empathetic, and she so isn't.
Yeah, she's just like a hard-nosed businesswoman, isn't she?
Yeah, again, it's like that sort of Cara Thrace thing of having very like masculine traits because all of the people she's surrounded with are men, so she has to kind of come to be at their level or speak like them, act like them. That's
like
the only way to survive.
Charge, take control of the situations.
Yeah.
Because she's like an outside person coming into Westworld, sort of like for the evaluation, isn't she?
Yeah.
Because you find out later part of what they're doing in the theme park is they're gathering data on all of the people which are visiting.
Yeah, all the humans.
Yeah, so they can sort of like better market stuff and they can do this extra technology.
It's like possibly to make them, to like offer, it's a bit like San Junipero, the Black Mirror episode. It's almost like to offer them immortality.
Yeah.
You can sort of download your personality into this physical being that will never die or age. I think that's essentially what it is.
It's like it's offering the idea of becoming AI yourself, which is sort of like for those kind of people, that's what they want. They want immortality.
And that's where it really splits off from Battlestar, where it's like the Cylons are, everyone's like, to be human is to die, essentially. And they're sort of saying, no, we don't want that. We don't want to be human. We want to be AI. It's fascinating. Which side would you go down?
What, would I sign up to have my consciousness put into an AI?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to try it.
Yeah, once.
Then go back.
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a really good question. It gets to like the core of some of the things that these shows are getting at, isn't it? Because it's such a tempting idea, but then if you were living in an AI body for 500 years, you might change your mind on all that.
Yeah. And also it's like Westworld plays with that idea of would you just keep doing the same thing over and over again? It sort of implies that humans have like one route because they're have something so ingrained in them. Like Ed Harris's character, the Man in Black, keeps on killing his daughter towards the end of series 2 again and again because that's his, sorry, Matt, spoiler.
Don't mind.
But that's like the only thing he can do at this point. It just keeps happening. Whereas like the AIs are trying to do something different with their lives to make choices. He doesn't seem to have that choice.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the mortality aspect is what is so important to the AIs, because going back to Battlestar, it's when the Cylons are away from the ship that can reincarnate them is when they sort of like realize about time and they feel that they get all these sort of like more human traits and emotions because suddenly they're not invincible, they're not going to live forever. And that's such a fundamental thing about being human that we're seeing in all these sort of like films and series, especially looking at AI. It's making these comments about how like mortality is a scary part of being human, but it's also part of what makes us human.
Yeah, that's a great turn in Battlestar Galactica when, because the skin jobs have a real like arrogant sheen to them, don't they? And it just drops off in those scenes where you see one that's been taken too far away from a base star, and they're suddenly sweating and panicking and really genuinely afraid, and you suddenly see that it's all just a confidence trick when they're acting all cocky and threatening and menacing, and they don't care if they die. Leobin's the first one that we see who's in that situation, isn't he?
Although he's not in that situation though, is he really? Because his body is just dying, but he does get downloaded because he then comes back.
He does come back, but I think at that moment we're not sure, because I think Adama threatens him with that. He says, I think Leobin says, well, I'll just get downloaded into a new body, and I think Adama's like, oh, will you though? I'm not so sure you will, because of all the the storms that are making them sick. He's like, I think you're scared actually. Yeah.
And the thing with the hosts in Westworld is they're constantly dying. But they've gotten used to it, because Maeve says a line where she says like, oh, I've died loads. I'm really good at it.
Yeah.
So they're constantly dying, but being like they're being wiped, so they've sort of like but they don't really have that sense of mortality. But again, that sort of like life and death thing is so important in both of these.
Do you guys watch The Good Place?
Yeah. I've been thinking about Good Place all the way through talking about this.
Because there's something there with the way that Janet gets reset, and she is very slightly cleverer every time she gets reset. And it's kind of happening to Maeve, isn't it? She's going through that same cycle of she experiences this thing that humans can never experience, which is coming back from the grave. And she's coming back a little bit stronger, a little bit better, and she's got this hidden knowledge that she's just getting glimpses of and becoming more than herself. And it's a weird twist on a similar thing that happens in The Good Place for a laugh.
Yeah.
You think I'm scared of death? I've done it 1,000,000 times. I'm fucking great at it. How many times have you died?
What happens at the end of series 2, another big spoiler, is they end up outside of Westworld, some of the hosts, and they're living there and sort of like integrating into human society from the looks of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do that, because Aaron Paul's in the new series as well.
I hate Aaron Paul.
Well, there you go. You're going to enjoy the next series then.
Actually, that's not fair. I do hate him. Yeah, carry on.
So it looks like he's going to have some sort of relationship with Dolores from the looks of it.
But is it Dolores or is it...
That's the thing.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
But Dolores is...
But yeah, so it looks like there's going to be sort of like, again, a human AI relationship kind of spin on it, and seeing what happens there. And obviously being like in human society, what's going to happen to these hosts when they're not in this weird world.
Yeah, where they're being killed and tortured every 5 minutes.
Like, will they grow from that?
Yeah.
And what's going to happen there?
There's also the Sublime in Westworld Series 2, where the hosts, like, sort of minds get uploaded to some sort of utopia, and their bodies just sort of fall and are discarded and end up in this like lake. It's like weird. Some sort of like they fall off a
heaven
ravine
place, isn't it?
It
for
is
their consciousness.
Exactly, because Dolores wants to turn that off. She essentially wants to commit genocide against her own people, maybe to upload them again, I'm not sure, and that's why Bernard kills her. So again, it's that the idea that's a sort of, it's not quite a religion as obviously as it is in Battlestar, but there is that idea of heaven. So does that mean that the other alternative is hell? It was like going into Earth to live amongst us?
I mean, it could be. That might be where the series is going.
So they're using religion for the AIs in Westworld. And it sounds like they're kind of forming their own religion from the ground up. Whereas in Battlestar, they've got a ready-made contrast of religions, haven't they? And they other the Cylons by giving them monotheism, don't they? It's an alien concept to the colonists that the Cylons would worship one single god.
Yeah.
They've got their... I really like that about Battlestar, that there's this rich backstory and believable world and all of that, and the religion's very well fleshed out in the background. What do you think of the fact that the Cylons have this ready-made monotheistic religion, which is actually something that we as a Western culture can relate to a bit more easily?
I was very disappointed when I realised that religion was actually playing quite a real part in this. Like, a lot of the visions come true, and
you didn't like it when I said that Six was an angel.
No, I did not like that.
The thing, I think a lot of people didn't.
It frustrates me because I think that's the whole idea of, for me, is sci-fi is applying. Well, it's the science, so applying logic to something illogical just doesn't work for me. As an atheist, that was something that I feel like is a bit of a get out clause for a lot of ways of like explaining things away that can't be explained, i.e. Starbuck, for like little holes in the writing or plot holes, whatever. That I found a bit frustrating. But I don't have a problem with the fact that they believed in it. Because I think that's, again, quite a human thing, clearly. I had a problem with the fact that it then turned out to be true.
So how many times have you watched the series then?
4,
right?
Maybe.
So, and you still feel that way every time you watch it? Because I've only seen it once all the way through, and I definitely felt that way. That I had a bit of disappointment. Maybe it's because I don't have religion myself.
Mm-hmm.
So for it to be such an important and powerful force in that universe didn't completely gel with my own worldview. On reflection, I've definitely like come to accept it a lot more and enjoy that element of it. And rewatching the miniseries, they're so upfront about it. It's the only thing. She says she's an angel. They're having visions.
That's so funny that I've completely blanked that out.
I think she says it in the miniseries in a bit of a teasing way. I could be an angel. I could be a figment of your own imagination.
You don't really believe it, do you, when she says it?
No, because Gaius doesn't believe it.
Yeah.
But I think she says it a few times. She calls herself that. They have visions. Rosalind's having visions. So that's visions from a whole different religion. She's a believer in the 12 Lords of Kobol. But she has these visions. Other people have visions. They lead them to Kobol. They lead them to Earth. Yeah.
Especially, yeah.
So it's all... I think they're very upfront about it. I don't think there's any sort of trick or twist there. I think they're always saying this is a religious universe and a religious show.
And I think I was hoping it was going to be a trick.
I think it's just the tricky thing when they're saying the religion is real, because that's part of religion in itself, is that there's that sort of like, there's always that thing where there's nothing to 100% prove stuff. So it's based on your faith. So the idea of sort of like having a faith in something is something that's coming through in both like the Cylons and the humans, because they're both sort of like have the idea in their head that there's another creator with a grand plan. And like you said, there is no plan. So it's tricky when they say like, look, there are angels and there is this going on, when sort of like what we're used to is there's no definite thing. And the whole point is you're supposed to have faith in it.
There is also like that, there are elements of magic which they explain as religion, and I feel like that doesn't really belong in a sci-fi where, for example, like when like that handful of them end up like finding the stars. Like, do you remember they sort of walk through
the arrow? Arrow that leads them. Apollo's arrow.
Yeah, and then they end up in this like almost like Stonehenge type place very briefly, and kind of they have different stars, and we sort of assume that they're perhaps our stars at the time. Like that.
Yeah. Maybe
and then
you
they
see
kind
Orion
of
or
go back
something.
And they just. That they don't explain how or why, or if that was a shared vision, or if that actually happened, how they got there. That's not scientifically explained, or that's not like...
But I still think it's important that they had the religion aspects in there, because they are so fundamental to society. And this is like a series which is looking at sort of politics and all that kind of stuff as well, and what it means to be human. And religion always tries to answer those questions, sort of like, why are we here? All those kind of things.
Yeah, and it's important for there to be an ideological difference between the one faction and the other. So when we're talking about a post 9/11 Iraq war real world, to have your others who are coming in and attacking you, and have them represented with a very specific and well-defined religion, which is different to our human characters' religion. That's really important for that real world context and understanding the relationship between these two factions.
There's also they engage in the idea that religion can also be made up on the spot, and in terms of Gaius and his cult, and how how dangerous that can be by just applying not well thought through like ideology to something, and how quickly that can gain followers, and then how quickly that can be disbanded as well. So it plays with the idea of religion throughout. It's not like it's sort of saying God exists, everybody. That's not the issue, I suppose. It is, I think it's a really important, interesting conversation. I haven't really thought about that in a post 9/11 world either. I think that's a really interesting point. So I think there are so many layers to Battlestar. It still disappoints me a little bit. I don't think that's ever going to go away, but it doesn't mean that it's bad.
Yeah.
I think they were struggling with ideas towards the end as well. And I think that having like Gaius and Number 6 as angels in our modern world is
that felt really solid to me, that last little bit. Were you not comfortable with the idea?
Well, yeah,
of
only if you buy into the idea that it's angels. Because is Gaius a religious man at all?
No. That's why he completely dismisses the idea that she might be an angel.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it that's how they weave it into the plot really well, I think. I do believe she's an angel. She's supposed to be an angel who has physical or semi-physical embodiment in that real world. It's the fact that she's given to this completely secular character, a man of science. That's how they can string it along for 4 seasons, where he's the only character who can see her. He's constantly denying the possibility that she might be an angel. So we as the audience go with him on that.
Yeah.
And you don't on first viewing necessarily entertain that possibility very much, because he doesn't. We haven't talked about, and I don't think we have time to get into it, the religious roots of the original Battlestar Galactica series. So Glenn A. Larson, who created it originally, is a dedicated Mormon.
Yeah, so he's put all of that in there. Yeah.
What?
And Mormonism has a lot of space stuff and alien stuff in it. Kobol is the birthplace of humanity in the Mormon religion, I think.
What?
Yeah. A lot of the stuff in this
And also-
traces its heritage back to Mormonism.
Okay. I love even the astrological signs and, how like Apollo's arrow and Greek mythology, like, there are so many things woven into the tapestry of Battlestar. And so that's why we think this has come from this is in our future, but it's really it's our past, but even further back than Greek mythology, So it's that what's happened before will happen again.
Speaking of which, there's a new series.
Yes.
What do you guys think about Sam Esmail doing a new series of Battlestar? So he specifically said that he's doing a new story within the mythology while staying true to the spirit of the series, like the
So
original.
it's basically not a reboot. It's not going to. We're not going to have the same characters. Although if it's set in the same world with the Cylons, because as we know there are only 12 models of Cylon, so either they're just going to say, "Oh no, there were more," or that they have the same actors, or what. That can't work. So I'm a bit confused about how that's going to work out.
Very dubious about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up for widening the mythology and whatever, and opening up a little bit more, as long as they're not trying to do the same again, which they're not.
What you just quoted sounds like publicity speak for it's a reboot.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's a
have a
direct
foot.
tweet from Sam Esmail.
That sounds like having a foot in both camps of appeasing people who don't want to reboot and people who do want to reboot.
Because he said he loves the series as well.
Yeah. The
Apparently
remake
it's definitely
series?
not
The remakes, this series we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently it's not a reboot. It's
Right.
just another, like in the Star Trek world, like
I think
Discovery
This
is.
has such a round ending. It's like
it has such a
this
round
is it.
ending, and
I
in
agree.
terms of
I don't think it's a great idea.
in terms of franchising things, this doesn't have the legs that the Star Trek franchise does, because there were so many attempts to make films of this, spin this off. Caprica was shit. Blood and Chrome could have been good, but it wasn't. What else did they do?
The Plan.
They did a couple of movies. Razor was all right.
But Razor was
About
more
Pegasus.
integrated, wasn't it?
Razor was basically part of the series.
Yeah.
The Plan was rubbish. They've had their time with this, and it hasn't worked as a franchise. I'd be more comfortable with a reboot just because I'd give it another go and I'd see what it's like. But I think this franchise can't keep going. It's proven itself not able to do that.
Yeah.
Speaking of not being able to continue on, I think that wraps things up really quite nicely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
We've talked about the reboot, and I don't think we need to say anything more about that just yet. Rhianna, thank you so much for coming on today's
You're welcome.
episode.
Thank you.
Thanks.
for
It's been
asking
an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you if they want to find you on the internet, social media?
I'm on Twitter at Rhianna Dhillon, and you can listen to me every Monday talking to Lauren Laverne on Six Music's Breakfast Show, doing film, TV, streaming. Yeah, have a listen. I might do some sci-fi stuff soon.
Excellent. Well, that's it from us. We'll see you again next week.